The Harness. Nope. The Harness of the Lord by Bill Britton. There is a terrific operation of the Spirit going on today to bring the sons of God into absolute confinement to the perfect will of God. This is the day of his preparation, the day in which he is preparing the channel through which he shall pour forth his glory for all the world to see. This channel is his body in the earth, a glorious company of people who are being conformed through much tribulation and fiery test to the image of the Son of God. This is his battle axe and weapons of war, with which he shall subdue kingdoms and overcome all his enemies. This is his mighty and strong one, to whom he shall commit the works of judging this world. This is his overcomer, his great army, with which he shall bring forth the nations into submission. The weapons of their warfare are not carnal, natural weapons, but they are mighty weapons, mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. These are those who shall be strong to do exploits. Before God can commit this great and tedious ministry unto their hands, they must submit themselves to the discipline of the Lord, letting him truly be the Lord of their entire lives. We have long since dealt with the question of open sin, but now God is dealing with the inward rebellion in our own wills. Some good Christians are not now being so dealt with, for they are not in this first fruits company. But nevertheless, there is a real dealing of God's going on with those who are calling into the high calling of God. This is a very real thing, and is the work of the refiner's fire. To those who are going through it, some of its aspects are horrible, but very necessary, and the end result thereof is glorious, as we are brought into absolute and complete submission to the will of our Lord. It was in a ministers' conference and convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that God gave me a vision which I want to share with you concerning this harness of our own wills. There were more than 30 ministers present in this particular Thursday morning service, and God, the Father of spirits, was present to deal with his sons, to correct them and discipline them to absolute obedience to his will. There was such a stern dealing in the Spirit that no one could go to the pulpit and minister. There was a reluctance among the ministers to say anything except that which was directly ordered by the Spirit. And as those men sat in their honest, in the awesome presence of God, some of them having many years of ministry, some missionaries, all of them capable of getting up and preaching a powerful sermon, I was impressed by the way they responded to the discipline of the Spirit. And in the midst of this terrific dealing of God with our spirits, the Holy Spirit gave me a vision. I saw the King's carriage. On a dirt road in the middle of a wide field stood a beautiful carriage, something on the order of a stagecoach, but all edged in gold, with beautiful carvings. It was pulled by 6 large chestnut horses, 2 in the lead, 2 in the middle, 2 in the rear. But they were not moving. They were not pulling the carriage, and I wondered why. Then I saw the driver underneath the carriage on the ground, on his back, just behind the last 2 horses' heels, working on something between the front wheels of the carriage. I thought, he is in a dangerous place, for if one of those horses kicked or stepped back, they would kill him. Or if they decided to go forward or got frightened somehow, they would pull the carriage right over him. But he didn't seem afraid, for he knew that those horses were disciplined. It would not move until he told them to move. The horses were not stamping their feet, nor acting restless, and through their bells on their feet, though their bells on their feet, the bells were not tinkling. There were pom-poms on their harnesses over their heads, but the pom-poms were not moving. They were simply standing still and quiet, waiting for the voice of their master. There were 2 young colts in the field. As I watched the harnessed horses, I noticed 2 young colts out in the open field, and they approached the carriage and seemed to say to the horses, "Come and play with us. We have fine games. We will race you. Come catch us." And And with that, the colts kicked up their heels, flicked their tails, and raced across the open field. But when they looked back and saw the horses were not following, they were puzzled. They knew nothing of the harness and could not understand why the horses did not want to play. So they called them. Why don't you race with us? Are you tired? Are you too weak? Do you not have strength to run? You are much too solemn. You need more joy in life. But the horses answered not a word, nor did they stamp their feet or toss their heads, but they stood quiet and still, waiting for the voice of the master. Again the colts called unto them, Why don't you stand so in the sun? Or why do you stand so in the sun? Come over here in the shade of this nice tree. See how green the grass is. You must be hungry. Come and feed us. It is so green and so good. You look thirsty. Come drink one of our many streams of cool, clear water. But the horses answered them not so much as a glance, but stood waiting for the commandment to go forward with the king. Colts in the master's corral. And the scene changed. I saw lariat nooses fall on the necks of the two colts, and they were led off to the master's corral for training and discipline. How sad they were as the lovely green fields disappeared, and they were put into the confinement of the corral, with its brown dirt high fence. The colts ran from fence to fence, seeking freedom, but found that they were confined to this place of training. And then the trainer began to work on them, his whip and his bridle. What a death for those who had been all their lives accustomed to such freedom. They could not understand the reason for this torture. Excuse me, let me get some water. This terrible discipline. What crime had they done to deserve this? Little did they know of the responsibility that was theirs when they had submitted to the discipline, learned to perfectly obey their master, and finished their training. All they knew was that this possessing was the most horrifying thing they had ever known. Submission and rebellion. One of the colts rebelled under the training and said, This is not for me. I like my freedom, my green hills, my flowing streams of fresh water. I will not take any more of this confinement, this terrible training. So he found a way and jumped the fence and ran happily to the meadows of the grass. I was astonished that the master let him go and went not after him, but he devoted his attention to the remaining colt. This colt, though he had the same opportunity to escape, decided to submit his will and learn the ways of the master. The training got harder than ever, but he was rapidly learning more and more how to obey the slightest wish of the master and to respond to even the quietness of his voice. And I saw that had there been no training, no testing, there would have been neither submission nor rebellion from either of the colts. For in the field they did not have the choice to rebel or submit. They were sinless in their innocence. But when brought to the place of testing and training and discipline, then was made manifest the obedience of one and the rebellion of the other. And though it seemed safer not to come to the place of discipline because of the risk of being found rebellious, yet I saw that without this there could be no sharing of his glory, no sonship. Into the harness. Finally, this period of training was over. He was now rewarded with his freedom and sent back to the field. Oh no, but a greater. Finally, this period of training was over. Was he now rewarded with his freedom to be sent back into the fields? Oh no, but a greater confinement than ever took place as the harness dropped about his shoulders. He now found that there was not even the freedom to run about the small corral, for in his harness he could only move when and where his master spoke, and unless the master spoke, he stood still. The scene changed as I saw the other colt standing on the side of the hill, nibbling at some grass. Then across the fields down the road came the king's carriage drawn by 6 horses. With amazement he saw that in the lead, on the right side, was his brother, Colt, now made strong and mature on the good corn in the master's stable. He saw the lovely pom-poms shaking in the wind, noticed the glittering gold bordering the harness about his brother, heard the beautiful twinkling of the bells on his feet, and envy came into his heart. Thus he complained to himself, "Why has my brother been so honored, and I am neglected? They have not put bells on my feet, nor pom-poms on my head. The master has not given me the wonderful responsibility of pulling his carriage, has not put me in the gold harness. Why have they chosen my brother instead of me?" And by the Spirit, the answer came back to me as I watched. Because one submitted to the will and discipline of the master, and one rebelled. Thus has one chosen, and the other set aside. A famine in the land. Then I saw a great drought sweep across the countryside, and the green grass became dead, dry, brown, and brittle. The little streams of water dried up, stopped flowing, and there was a small muddy puddle here and there. I saw the little colt. I was amazed that it never seemed to grow mature. As he ran here and there across the fields, looking for fresh streams and green pastures to find none. Still he ran, seemingly in circles, looking around for something to feed his famished spirit. But there was a famine in the land, and the rich green pastures and flowing streams of yesterday were not to be had. And one day the colt stood on the hillside, weak and wobbly-legged, wondering where to go next and to find food and how to get strength to go. It seemed like there was no use, for good food and flowing streams were a thing of the past, and all the efforts to find more only taxed his waning strength. Suddenly he saw the king's carriage coming down the road pulling the 6 great horses, and he saw his brother, fat and strong, muscles rippling, sleek and beautiful, with much grooming. His heart was amazed and perplexed, and he cried out, "My brother, where did you find the food to keep you strong and fat in these days of famine? I have run everywhere. I have run everywhere in my freedom, searching for food, and I find none. Where do you in your awful confinement find food in this time of drought? Tell me, please, for I must know." And then the answer came back from a voice filled with victory and praise. "In my master's house there is a secret place in the confining limitations of his stables, where he feeds me by his own hand, and his granaries never run empty, and his well never runs dry." And with this the Lord made me to know that in the day when the people are weak and famished in their spirits, in the time of spiritual famine, that those who have lost their own souls and have come into the secret place of the Most High, the utter confinement of his perfect will, shall have plenty of the corn of heaven, and a never-ending flow of fresh streams of revelation by his Spirit. Thus the vision ended. The interpretation of the vision. Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run and readeth it. Habakkuk 2:2. Harness the horses, and get up, ye horsemen. Jeremiah 64:4. I am sure that many of you who can hear what the Spirit saith to the church have already seen what God is showing in the vision. But let me make it plain. Being born into the family of God, feeding in the green pastures, and drinking of the many streams of the unfolding revelation of his promises is fine and wonderful, but it is not enough. While we are children, young and undisciplined, limited only by the outer fence of the law, that run around the limits of the pastures, that keep us from getting into the dark pastures of poison weeds. He was content to watch us develop and grow into young manhood, spiritually speaking. But the time came to those who fed on his pastures and drank at his streams, when they were to be brought into discipline or child training for the purpose of making them mature sons. Many of the children today cannot understand why some of those who have put on the harness of God cannot get excited by the many religious games and playful antics of the immature. They wonder why the disciplined ones run not after every new revelation, or feed on every opportunity to engage in seemingly good and profitable religious activities. They wonder why some will not race with them in their frantic efforts to build great works and great and notable ministries. They cannot understand the simple fact that this company of saints is waiting on the voice and of the Master, and they do not hear God in all this outward activity. This will move in their time when the Master speaks, but not before. Though many temptations come from playful cults, and the cults cannot understand why those who seemingly appear to have great abilities and strengths are not putting it to good use. Get the carriage on the road, they say, but the disciplined ones, those in God's harness, know better than to move before they hear the voice of their Master. They will move in their time with their purpose and great responsibility. And the Lord made me to know that there were many whom had brought it into training, who had rebelled against the discipline, the chastising of the Father. They could not be trusted with the great responsibility of mature sonship, so he let them go back to their freedom, but to their back to their religious activities and revelations and gifts. They are still his people, still feeding in his pasture, but he has set them aside from the great purposes of this end of age. So they revel in their freedom, feeling that they were the chosen ones with the many streams of living waters, not knowing that they have been set aside as unfit for his great work in this end of the age. He showed me that though the chastising seemeth grievous for the time, and the discipline hard to endure, yet the result, with all glory of sonship, is worth it. Wonderful. And the glory to the follow far exceeds the suffering we endure. And though some lose even their lives in this training, yet they still share alike in the glory of his eternal promises. So faint not, saints of God, for it is the Lord that doth bring thee into confinement, and not thine enemy. For it is for thy good, and for his glory. So endure all things with praises and thanksgiving, that he hath counted thee worthy to share his glory. Fear thou not the whip of his hand, for it is not punish thee, but to correct thee, and train thee, that thou mightest come into submission to his will, and be found in his likeness in that hour. Rejoice thou in the trials and all thy tribulations, and glory thou in his cross, and in the confining limitations of his harness. For he hath chosen thee, and he hath taken upon thee himself the responsibility to keep thee strong and well fed. So lean thou upon him, and trust not thine own ability and thine own understanding. So shalt thou be fed, and his hand shall be upon thee, and the glory of the Lord shall overshadow thee, and shall flow through thee as it goes forth to cover the earth. Glory be to God. Bless the Lord. He is wonderful. Let the Lord be of your life, friends, and complain not at that which he bringeth to pass in your life. Plenty in the time of famine. For in the hour when famine sweeps the land, he shall feed by his own hand those who are submitted to his perfect will, and who will dwell in the secret place of the Most High. When terror stalks the land, those in his harness shall not be afraid, for they shall feel his bit and bridle, and know the guidance of his Spirit. When others are weak and frail and fearful, there shall be those who shall bring forth in the power of his might, and shall lack for no good thing. In the hour when the traditions of the religious systems have proven false, and their streams have dried up, then his chosen one shall speak forth with the true word of the Lord. So rejoice, sons of God, that you have been chosen by his grace for his great work in this last hour. The fence which kept the colts in their own meadow and their own pastures meant nothing to the team in the harness, for the gates open to them, and they go forth, pulling the king's carriage into many strange and wonderful places. They do not stop and eat the poison weeds of sin, for they feed only in the master's stable. These fields they trample under their feet as they go forth on the king's business. As so, those who are brought into absolute submission to his will, there is no law. For they move in the grace of God, led only by the Holy Spirit, where all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. This is a dangerous realm for the undisciplined, and many have perished in sin as they leapt over the fence without the harness and his bridle. Some have thought of themselves as being completely harnessed and submissive to him, only to find that in some avenue of their lives there dwelled rebellion and self-will. Let us wait before him until he puts his noose around us and draws us to his place of training. And let us learn of the dealings of God and the moving of his Spirit until at last we feel his harness drop upon us and hear his voice guiding us. Then there is safety from the straps and pitfalls of sin. Then shall we abide in his house forever. Thank you for listening.